Lagina has finally said what treasure hunters have been waiting centuries to hear. Beneath the solid rock of Oak Island, a hidden Templar chamber has been uncovered directly below the original money pit, containing carved stone vaults, ornate metal pieces, and symbols tied to the Knights Templar. For generations, people called it legend, nothing more than rumor, but new deep scan technology, sealed historical documents, and real footage now prove that the Laginas have found something extraordinary. This discovery doesn't just answer the Oak Island mystery, it reveals a secret that has been buried for over 700 years, and viewers are urged to like, subscribe, and join the exploration of the vault that may finally close the chapter on Oak Island. The announcement came almost quietly, which is strange considering what it meant, because after months of sonar scans and failed drilling attempts, Rick's team located a void almost 180 feet beneath the swamp, sealed and untouched, a space that should not have existed according to every geological model. Yet there it was, carved into bedrock, sitting below a tunnel that lined up with the original money pit. For Rick, this was not just another dig site, but the anomaly they had been chasing for years. Early scans showed metallic readings that were too structured to be natural, layered, and deliberate, running alongside a secondary shaft never seen on 18th century maps, proving the design was centuries old. When the data came in, Rick said on camera, "This could be the original vault." Once they broke through the outer seal, they found hand-cut stone, worn smooth by water, and at the base was a limestone slab, the size of a door, carved with a weathered cross pate, the same emblem used by the Knights Templar. The markings were ancient, confirmed by carbon dating to be older than any colonial presence, older than the first maps of the area. What shocked the team further was that the stone had been perfectly preserved using marine clay, a technique far ahead of its time, showing whoever built the chamber understood both engineering and geology. Along one edge were faint, coded symbols that later matched the secret markings in Scotland's Rosslyn Chapel, long connected to Templar lore. And when Marty Lagina saw the match, he said, "This isn't theory anymore. This is a physical link to Templar movement right here on Oak Island." The connection was no longer abstract. It was carved into stone and hidden under mud for 6 centuries. As they continued deeper, radar sweeps returned, repeating metallic signals at perfect intervals, showing rows of objects too precise to be random rock. Rick ordered a micro-drill sample, and the dust that came back up was quartz, mixed with small flakes of refined gold, not natural gold, but worked and melted by human hands centuries earlier. For the first time, Rick dropped his usual caution and said, "We might not be chasing a legend anymore. We might be standing on it." And that sentence changed everything. Because if refined gold was buried before Europeans reached Nova Scotia, the treasure was more than wealth. It was knowledge. Searching for answers, and the team turned to history. And in the French naval archives at La Rochelle, a forgotten map from 1701 surfaced, showing a place labeled L'Île Perdue, the island of lost gold. And when the coordinates were adjusted for magnetic drift, the shape aligned with Oak Island almost perfectly. What stunned them wasn't only the destination on the old chart. It was the notes crammed along the border in a tangled mix of Latin and archaic French, describing l'Opéra du Temple, the vault of the temple, hidden beneath layers of engineered stone traps designed to collapse if anyone tampered with them. When the brothers laid the sketch over their excavation plans, the alignment was uncanny. The chamber they had just accessed sat almost exactly where the map had marked its central cache. Marty shook his head and called it an impossibility, but Rick wasn't convinced. Someone in France had drawn this centuries before Oak Island entered any written record, suggesting the secret of the vault had endured long after the Templars were forced underground, perhaps carried by sailors who had fled across the Atlantic with pieces of the Order's hidden wealth. Every avenue of research kept circling back to one name, repeatedly crossed out in the ledgers of French ports: La Rochelle's ghost, a ship rumored to have disappeared during the 1307 purge. Some believed it had escaped with a false identity and vanished west into the unknown. The chart found at La Rochelle seemed to validate that idea and hinted that Oak Island wasn't a random landing. It was the end point of a carefully planned voyage, a refuge for something the French crown was never meant to find. Meanwhile, the excavation continued. As sediment and stone were cleared from the newly mapped passage, a worker spotted a faint shimmer trapped in limestone. What looked at first like a bent piece of wire turned out to be a fragment of brass chain fossilized into the rock. Once cleaned and magnified, the links revealed tiny engravings, each shaped into the Templar cross. This wasn't jewelry, but ceremonial adornment, the kind worn by high-ranking knights. Laboratory tests confirmed the metal wasn't colonial or modern. Its alloy composition matched 13th century French metallurgy, identical to chains uncovered in Templar burial grounds near Poitiers, with every detail from the soldering to the purity pointing directly to medieval Europe. The implications were extraordinary. That fragment predated any recorded European activity in North America by over a century and a half. The chain alone could force historians to rethink Oak Island entirely. Yet what lay beneath it stunned the team even further. As they carefully removed the earth around the fragment, they uncovered a small lead container, light enough to lift, but so brittle with age, it looked ready to fall apart. Its seams were sealed with wax and resin, each edge shaped by hand. Inside, miraculously preserved in oxygen-starved mud, was a folded scrap of parchment held to a layer of wax. Under meticulous climate control, conservators slowly unfurled it. Letters appeared, faint black ink stretching across the surface in flowing medieval French. The translation sent a chill through the room. The lines spoke of l'Arche Grand Tra, the Great Arc, and warned of le secret sous la rose, the secret beneath the rose. These were not idle phrases. Both were recognized as Templar codes. The Great Arc referring to relics rescued from Jerusalem, the rose symbolizing the hidden veil protecting sacred knowledge. Paleographers compared the handwriting to documented Templar clerical samples in the French National Archives, and one match stood out: a scribe active in Paris until the day the order was arrested in 1307. That connection placed the parchment inside the timeline of the last Grandmaster himself. Yet something even more astonishing emerged. Using infrared scans, linguists noticed faint shifts in the initial letters at the start of each line. When read together, they formed an acrostic: Domus Dei, House of God. To Templar scholars, that phrase carried meaning beyond piety. It pointed to the inner sanctuary of the Order, the place where their most guarded relics were kept before vanishing from Europe. Rick studied the translation table for a long moment before finally speaking. "Whoever buried this wasn't trying to hide it forever," he said quietly. "They wanted it remembered, but only by those who knew how to read the signs. The chain, the parchment, the map, they weren't coincidences. Together, they formed a single path that stretched from medieval France across the ocean and ended beneath the marshes of Nova Scotia." The conclusion was undeniable. The vault wasn't myth. It was intentional, constructed, protected, and concealed for reasons far beyond gold alone. That realization transformed everything. The evidence wasn't just historical, it was mechanical. Whoever designed these clues had mastered navigation, construction, and secrecy centuries ahead of their time. If the artifacts were meant to direct the team here, then the structure beneath them might have been engineered to prevent anyone else from reaching it. Acting on that theory, the team recalibrated their drilling coordinates and tested the area just beyond the vault line. What they found shattered previous surveys. The next chamber wasn't rough stone or collapse. It was designed. As the drill pushed downward, the camera revealed a lattice of wood and brass woven through the bedrock. This was no natural feature. It was a defense system. The timbers were fitted with brass pulleys and water valves arranged in a cross configuration, forming a counterweighted mechanism similar to rigging used on medieval ships to raise anchors or secure cargo. Every component connected to the next. One mistake could trigger flooding or a collapse. It was clear that whoever built it never intended the vault to survive discovery. They intended it to protect itself. The craftsmanship seemed impossible for the 1300s, yet every join, every angle, every fitting was executed with precision. Maritime engineers confirmed that the layout resembled shipborne pulley systems from medieval Europe, leading to a chilling conclusion. The builders weren't ordinary stoneworkers. They were Templar sailors who had escaped by sea and used their shipbuilding knowledge to design a subterranean fortress. For Rick, the revelation redefined everything. The vault beneath Oak Island wasn't haphazard. It was nautical engineering turned into earth and stone, the work of sailors hiding something that was never supposed to be recovered. As debris was carefully removed, Rick summed up the feeling over the comms. This isn't a vault made to be found. It's a vault built to destroy itself if anyone tries. The phrase stuck, and before long, the crew started calling it the Guardian Mechanism, a name that captured the unsettling intelligence behind the structure. Every cut of the drill felt like a gamble with the past, every tremor monitored to avoid a catastrophic chain reaction. But they soon realized that the mechanism underground was only half of the design. The other half was above them, carved into the island itself. Using high-resolution LiDAR to scan the landscape, the team identified a series of stone markers hidden by brush and uneven ground. They weren't random boulders or natural deposits. Each had been placed with intent, forming a geometric alignment, stretching from Smith's Cove to the Money Pit and across the swamp. When plotted digitally, the pattern revealed a perfect symmetrical cross. It wasn't just symbolic, it was functional. Every point coincided with a known dig site or subsurface anomaly that previous researchers ignored. When Marty rotated the model and aligned it with the sky, the shape matched the constellation Orion star for star. Ancient Templar star charts used the same configuration for navigation. It was impossible to dismiss. They had encoded their layout using the heavens, a celestial map hidden in the island's topography, readable only to those who understood the stars. Rick watched the display as the pattern stabilized. The Money Pit, Smith's Cove, the new vault, all lined up with the three brightest stars of Orion's belt. The realization hit them all at once. Oak Island wasn't just a hiding place, it was an instrument, a stellar code translated into soil and stone. Every shaft, chamber, and artifact was part of a larger plan meant to shield a single central chamber. The treasure, they'd always imagined, might only be the outer shell of something deeper, something constructed with sacred precision. When digging resumed along the newly mapped cross-alignment, the drill finally broke through into another hidden space. This one wasn't reinforced with timber at all, but finished in smooth, polished limestone. At its center stood an arched portal, locked tight and engraved with a remarkable emblem, a single rose in full bloom, encircled by vinework and intersecting crosses. The carving wasn't ornamental. It was the rosy cross, the same symbol that later became the mark of the Rosicrucians, a group believed by many scholars to have descended from surviving Templars. The placement left no room for uncertainty. This was the doorway to the central vault, the core of everything the island had been constructed to shield. Even before they attempted contact, the scanners revealed what was waiting behind it. Metal readings spiked off the charts, higher than anything the team had ever recorded. Dense, structured, enclosed to perfection. Whatever was sealed beyond that rose gate was metallic, and the volume was massive. The magnetometer struggled to hold a stable read. The sheer weight of gold and alloy twisted the signal. It was enough material to dwarf the entire Money Pit cache many times over. For the first time, the numbers erased all doubt. This wasn't imagination or hopeful theory. It was a physical hoard. Coffers, containers, perhaps dozens of them, stacked within a single, sealed stone room. Rick immediately halted all drilling. No one was willing to risk triggering a collapse from the Guardian mechanism. Conservation specialists arrived at once. Using micro cameras and non-destructive imaging, they lowered a fiber optic lens through a borehole, barely wider than a pencil, threading it past the stone and into the chamber on the other side. The feed flickered to life, showing a narrow corridor lined with limestone and buried under centuries of sediment. Then the image sharpened, and a glint cut through the darkness, a flare of reflected light from something below. The team froze. The reflection wasn't random. It was gold, unmistakable in the camera beam, soft and ancient in its glow. The more the lens adjusted, the more glimmers appeared. Gold flashed from object after object. There weren't just one or two pieces. There were many, dozens, perhaps hundreds. A chamber of gold sealed beneath the rose, untouched for over 6 centuries. Rick didn't speak, but the look on his face revealed everything: astonishment, disbelief, and the quiet understanding that this wasn't about wealth. It was about significance, a message set in stone, geometry, and faith. For generations, Oak Island had been a story of traps, misdirection, and carefully crafted failure. But now, as the camera illuminated the depths behind the Rose Gate, the truth came into view. The island had never been guarding riches for greed. It had been safeguarding a purpose, a secret, meant to endure. As the image sharpened, the golden glare softened into outlines, shadows, and angles.